This has been a long time coming. Let's finish this. So, very obviously, this part came out very far away from part 3. I really do apologize for that. Unfortunately, I made this story at a terrible time to actually do so. The Moral arc of Dragon Ball Super, the manga, was just starting, and I didn't want to bookend the series and then have to do something afterwards, or maybe retcon or redo anything. I really wanted the end of this story to be an end, a concrete, no more end. All great stories come to an end, and this timeline must end here. Again, I know it has been a while, but for the sake of time, I will not have a recap in this video. So, I advise you guys to give the entire series a look over before viewing this part. It'll be linked in the description below, and an iCard should pop up pretty soon. And so finally, we return to this story, now. The move over to Bardock's leadership was not a smooth transition. He had truly meant that the entirety of their culture was about to change, and as such, when he made his offer for the dissenters to leave without issue but be treated as Frieza Force loyalists, he meant that as well. Predictably, a very large majority of the Saiyans had indeed refused this and were going to leave the planet as soon as the necessary transportation was arranged for them. Vegeta Sr. was among and leading these Saiyans, and his sons couldn't care less about that. There was another interesting group who found it extremely hard to do, but made the decision to stay and follow Bardock's rules. Bardock's old crew. Fasha, Pumpkin, aka Shugesh, Borgos, aka Totepo, Link, and Taro. They were all extremely loyal to their commander, and seeing how powerful and mature he'd become while they were dead made that deep respect they already had for him grow. There was no way they'd stand against him now. The Saiyan deserters took nearly every ship still on the planet and left. When all was said and done, nearly 70% of the planet's inhabitants had deserted them. Of those who stayed, there were mostly the cooks and engineers, and some of the much younger children, as in babies born the same day Frieza stood the planet that had been revived still as babies. Saiyans who had virtually zero battle experience, and as such, no real inclination to want to stay with the older ways of Saiyan society. They just wanted to live. But to the deserters, Bardock gave one more warning. You have 1 year. After that, we're coming after all of you and the rest of Frieza's dregs. The Saiyans couldn't help but feel a bit of fear at that statement. With no time to waste, one of Bardock's first orders of business was to get their planet back up and stable. To do that, he realized they needed a few things, one of which being money. But again, they were done with conquering planets, so they had to find a new way to earn money. Already a step ahead, Vegeta has a thought. There were all kinds of bounties and odd jobs out in the universe. Mercenary work could be their new calling. For now, they could do small things like that to generate some income and build off that. Bardock smirks, but this kid was meant to be the king at one point, so of course he had some good ideas politically. Liking the idea, Bardock sends Kakarot, Raditz, Tarble, Broly, and Vegeta out to do just that. Realizing Bardock has only chosen the younger Saiyans, Tor jokes that he and Bardock are getting a bit too old to be gallivanting around the universe. The other Saiyan just grumbles and punches him playfully. Before the money-making team can depart, Bardock tells his family that they'll have to go and pay respects to Lord Guru when things have become a bit more stable. Kakarot, Broly, Gine, Fava, and Raditz agree to this, and the family share a hug. With their monetary situation having a short-term solution, Bardock thinks of the next order of business. Thinking back to Tor's annoying joke about Bardock's age, it brought up one of his other ideas. Remember, he had spent a lot of time on Namek and learned a lot of their culture, and one of the things he really paid attention to was the leadership of the planet. Namek was led by Guru himself, but the planet's population was small enough that it was possible to allow different sub-leaders to care for different portions of the planet, these being the Elders and Grand Elder himself. This meant that while the Grand Elder had supreme decision-making powers, his other elders were old enough and wise enough to run the day-to-day of their individual villages. This kept stress on Guru himself to a minimum and allowed the elders to seek counsel and discuss issues, getting different perspectives and coming up with the best possible decision for all parties. Their numbers weren't that low, but damn near close at this point. This gave him a different idea though. Still having a central leadership, yes, but maybe having something similar to the advisors or viziers a Saiyan king would have in the past, yet giving those people a much larger voice and a lot more power. A fusion between Namekian and Saiyan leadership. That was kinda how Kakarot and Fava had grown up, and Bardock thought that might be the best way for future generations to grow as well. And so, time begins to pass like this. Kakarot and the younger, more capable Saiyans bringing in money through mercenary work, while the older ones use it in ways that begin helping them to rebuild their planet. A year passes and word starts to spread. The Saiyans were apparently back after being gone for decades. There were some acting as they always had, and others acting as heroes almost. Frieza and King Cold were apparently dead now, and connection between these two events was speculated about across the entire universe. And with Frieza and King Cold dead and the Dragon Balls not known of by their empire, no one is aware that Frieza can come back if wished for. In response, the higher-ups in the empire like Sorbet, Berry Blue, and Kikuno try to keep some kind of order in the empire, but this is difficult as there isn't any central powerful force that terrifies all their underlings and keeps them very loyal. Two members of the Frieza Force by the names of Abo and Kato try to do just that, but they're unsuccessful, especially when Kato dies on a mission trying to protect his men from these Saiyan bounty hunters. On the other hand, the Saiyans who had deserted Planet Vegeta began joining and forming separate gangs of bandits with some of these disbanding Frieza Force members. They weren't too fond of the other Frieza Force members, but their year was now up, meaning Bardock and his Saiyans would be after them soon. As they were holding onto their old ways, of course King Vegeta would still be in charge of these Saiyans. And this is why the view of Saiyans was slowly changing in the universe. Yes, there were bad Saiyans, but it seemed there was also a group of much stronger Saiyans, easily taking them down and turning them into local authorities before collecting a bounty or reward and leaving. Sometimes they would stay around to eat though. Stories, tall tales, fables, and the equivalent of superhero comics began to spread around the universe about the heroic Saiyans and their adventures. Again, the destruction of Frieza and King Cold and the reappearance of Saiyans, both good and bad, could be no mere coincidence. And someone very special begins to hear about this, the Galactic King, the leader of the Galactic Patrol. He's hearing that Saiyans, the former scourges of the universe, are returning, but very different, to the point where they're doing the job of his organization and not Frieza's. In response, he orders an investigation by one of his best men, and he's getting confirmations that the rumors are completely true. So, with a very good idea in mind, he creates a huge rumor about the Frieza Force attacking a planet as some kind of show of their remaining power. He'd also create an absolutely huge bounty as a reward to any mercenaries willing to protect this planet. With the bounty set so large, it doesn't take long before a Saiyan arrives to protect the planet to receive it. Specifically, this Saiyan was Broly, and unknowingly, his stoicism and calm demeanor are gonna make him the best Saiyan for this job. Members of the Galactic Patrol wait on him and ask him to follow them, which he does pretty calmly. They bring him to the Galactic Patrol King, who examines the Saiyan very curiously. But he's most curious about how and why the Saiyans had changed, and he gets a few answers from the calm and stoic Broly. This really sets it in stone that the Galactic Patrol wants these guys on his side, and the King convinces Broly to help him set up a meeting between he and the new boss of the Saiyans to do just that. Agreeing to this, Broly accompanies the Galactic King and his personal guard to the former planet Vegeta. They were still working on a new name. The planet was now doing better. The younger Saiyans were starting to grow and be more independent, more ships are being built by the engineers, meaning more transportation, and the cooks and butchers learned lots from Gine, who during her time on planet Earth had tried lots of different food and learned actual recipes that Saiyan food just couldn't top. She quite liked teaching now. Schools had been built. The meditation and ki control learned on planet Namek were being taught en masse now, and the Saiyans on the planet were actually friendlier. The planet was rebuilding and doing pretty well, but they could be doing much better, and the Galactic King thinks he can help, hence why Broly brought him. Grand Elder, or as he likes to be called, Boss Bardock, and his council of quote-unquote other elders are brought to meet with the Galactic King, where an explanation is given for the changes the Saiyans had made and what their current goal is.
We ain't heroes or any of that other stuff the galaxy is calling us. We Saiyans were living in a way that made us weak. That ain't our style, so we're trying something different. A way of living that doesn't have us living under a tyrant's boot and makes us stronger. It just so happens that way of life aligns with your sense of justice.
This is good enough for the king. These warriors wanted to do good, and he had a lot of good in the universe he wanted to do that his men just weren't strong enough to accomplish fully. So he offers a deal: become a part of the Galactic Patrol. This will allow them to receive funding and good publicity, and they'd be able to join the economy of the universe instead of the more illegal means they used to be in. Bardock and his council consider this idea and agree, and so once again, time moves on, but with a few advantages. With the help of the Galactic Patrol, the Saiyans begin to grow even more and a lot faster. More money meant their formerly meager means of living were much more upgraded. They can afford to hire help from off-planet and even trade with different planets, many of which they had helped to protect and so had become close allies very quickly. This left more time for recreational activities, and as such, the Saiyan population began to grow in the universe. Even Kakarot, Broly, and Vegeta are able to settle down, but something strange begins to happen. More and more Saiyan babies are being born with the same condition as Fava, where their tails are extremely small, but their potential is anything but. and some are even being born without tails. These children are naturally taken to the meditation and more peaceful and loving lifestyle of the Saiyans, and yet their fighting spirit is diminished by no means. In fact, more than anything, these children remind Bardock and Kakarot of what a young warrior clan Namekian was like. So while yes, being less traditionally Saiyan, these children when it came to training and fighting were strong, really strong. They're still young, but this new generation proves Bardock and his allies correct in the eyes of the older Saiyans, and as such, Bardock's leadership is decided to continue for a while longer. This was the right way. Now with more money, freedom, and a positive reputation, Bardock leads 2 expeditions to 2 different planets. First is of course Planet Namek. Bardock wants to go and pay respects to Guru because he was a grandfather figure to Kakarot and had become sort of a mentor / father figure to him as well. He also wants to establish with the new Grand Elder that the planet is forever under the protection of not only he and his family and friends, but by the Saiyan race as a whole, and now the Galactic Patrol. We'd also get a few cute moments like Kakarot and Nail spending some time together and reminiscing about old times, as they had a brotherly bond when Kakarot was growing up. Bardock may be getting advice on how to run his planet, which the elders might just tell him to keep meditating. And Gine's sentimental side might have her being the one that Bardock has to basically pull away from all the hugging and goodbyes before they leave on to their next expedition. This one to the planet known as Earth. There, Bardock sees that the years they've been away had been pretty kind to the planet, as it had been fully rebuilt through the use of the Dragon Balls. Kakarot is extremely interested in this planet and wonders, what if? And Gine is really excited to learn some more Earth food recipes. Once arriving, they go and meet the Guardian of the Earth. Kakarot is shocked to meet another Namekian, especially this old and on this planet. He actually greets him by speaking in fluent Namekian, kinda shocking Kami. Bardock interrupts and tells Kami that in return for his kindness when he'd allowed he and Gine to wait on Earth to retrieve Raditz, the planet Earth was now under his and the Galactic Patrol's protection. Just like with Namek, if the planet ever needed any type of help, just get in contact with the Saiyans. Kami graciously accepts this offer, as it was clear that this wasn't just to have access to Earth's Dragon Balls. And again, time begins to pass really rapidly, almost a decade actually. Kakarot and his elite crew of Saiyan heroes were now universal heroes. What remained of the Frieza Force and Evil Saiyans had been thrown into Galactic Patrol prison by the combined forces of the Saiyans and the Galactic Patrol themselves. The organization had become extremely powerful over time, and so had its prisons. All the heavy hitters who held any respect or weight had been taken down by this point. The most evil army in the universe were now down and out. The Frieza Force was a mere distant nightmare now. Love and peace were beginning to reign throughout the universe, and the Saiyans were loved and praised across it. Even the North Kai had gotten into contact with Kakarot and his crew and thanked them for making his part of the universe so safe. In terms of differences, the new generations of Saiyans were being given choices about how they lived their lives. They didn't have to be warriors if they didn't want to, but they are still warriors at heart. So now it wasn't rare to see young heroic Saiyans fighting off petty thieves and marauders on their own planets. Just as much, Saiyan engineers, farmers, jobs that didn't involve the fist were also very common now. Kakarot and his team would gallivant around the universe and rescue planets in distress, always thankful to meet new alien races and learn new techniques and customs from them. One of their favorites were those of the Ardratians and their ideas of spirit control and the instant transmission technique. It had made their travel extremely easy and added even more tall tales to their legends. Pure power also came to this group in spades. As Kakarot, Vegeta, and the others tried to keep up with the ever-powerful Broly, the peaceful Saiyan was always able to surpass them and make them go even higher in response. The entire group would soon discover new forms of Super Saiyan, even one which took almost 7 years of time to achieve. Broly would even learn to control himself no matter how angry he got by spending some more time with Nail on planet Namek. This caused a domino effect of the other Saiyans in Kakarot's group always vying for greater and greater power. Their reputation was so widespread now that the Saiyan homeworld will receive 2 very prestigious guests. They introduce themselves as the Kais, one of them being a supreme one. They request the help of Kakarot and his team to stop an ancient evil that'd be awakening on the Earth. He tells them the entire story, causing Bardock, his council, and Kakarot's team to question them.
Wait, are you saying you're stronger than Frieza, but you did nothing to stop him?
The Supreme Kai sweat drops at this question and explains his place is not to interfere with mortals unless something cataclysmic is imminent, like right now. So, Bardock and his council agree, and Kakarot and his team, along with the Kais, travel to the Earth. Once there, they track down the wizard with the help of Kami's powers and basically raid his ship. Babidi is shocked at their arrival, but he's glad the legendary Saiyan heroes have arrived. That would definitely speed up the rate his Majin Buu could be awoken at. He sicks his henchmen on the group, including the Demon King, but like the rest, they fall extremely easily to the Saiyan's might. The heroes are unsatisfied and bored, but they don't lose heart, as this Majin Buu threat sounds like he'll be a real challenge for them. Babidi, getting a good idea, preys on this and tells him that Buu is the strongest creature ever. He'll never be defeated. The Saiyans are even more excited, and shocking Supreme Kai give up their power pretty willingly. Majin Buu awakens, and the anticipation is killing the Saiyans as he pours out of his orb. But once the pudgy pink creature is fully in front of them, they get incredibly angry. This thing wasn't even as strong as Broly. This wasn't going to be a challenge for them. In anger, they easily do away with Buu and Babidi's henchmen. Granted, as a part of the Galactic Patrol, they were supposed to capture villains alive, but with the Saiyans, that wasn't ever a guarantee. Panicking, the little wizard Babidi tries to control Broly, who he feels the most negative emotions coming from. As he says his incantation, Broly holds his head for a while, as an M appears on his forehead. Kakarot puts a hand on his shoulder to check on him, and the Saiyan just looks up and scowls as he walks over to the cackling Babidi. He reaches down and picks him up by his bulbous little head, making him stop laughing.
Wait, you're in control of yourself? But how? I feel all these negative emotions and anger within you.
I'm always angry. This is nothing new. And with a quick squeeze, Babidi's threat to the universe is completely snuffed out. The Supreme Kai sighs in relief and thanks the Saiyans, who decide they're going to go back home and spar, as this wasn't the battle they were hoping for. At this, the Kai sweat drops that the Saiyans were eccentric, almost insane even, but they were on the side of good and of life. And so, with this done, the universe becomes a utopia, and everyone lives happily ever after. Things are getting boring, and boring is good for peace. A being slinks out of his bed as his attendant greets him. He complains about how early this was for him to wake up, but this was the time his oracle fish had told him something would happen. He then attempts to tell his attendant Whis about a premonition he'd had, but very rarely and very strangely for Whis, the angel is visibly excited and interrupts his god. So much had happened in the universe while the god had been asleep, and he'd been absolutely dying of boredom just watching it. Beerus is taken aback by this, but decides to hear what Whis has to say. And so, Whis begins to regale Beerus with a huge history lesson about the last 30 or so years and what had been going on in the universe. Initially, he hadn't known or cared much about Kakarot or the other Saiyans, but after the defeat of Frieza, his attention was gained. Since then, the Saiyans had all returned to life, their planet had reformed, and their number and the number of the entire universe had increased in terms of mortal life by a huge amount because of how powerful the fused Galactic Patrol and the Saiyans had become. Now here that those upstart Saiyans have returned, Beerus is shocked and angered. Frieza let some survive, and the Pestet found a way to return and even take Frieza down himself. Forgetting about his premonition for now, Beerus orders Whis to take him to the Saiyan homeworld. He's going to see what those barbarians have made of themselves, and if he doesn't like it, he's going to snuff them out himself. Whis is excited to go and meet these Saiyans, and so the two deities begin their journey. Meanwhile, on the planet formerly known as Vegeta, Bardock and his council were just about to finish a meeting. His age is starting to catch up with him, not a ton, but it is there. The council is currently speaking about Bardock's goal of wanting to step down as the quote-unquote Grand Elder. It was just a pretty boring job to him, and he wanted to retire and spend more time with his wife and train before his body completely fell apart on him. With this in mind, everyone decides they'd hold nominations for the next head of the council, but from the initial conversations, it seems like Kakarot was going to be the fan favorite. Bardock had already spoken to his youngest son, but the younger man didn't want the job. Hell, most Saiyans didn't. Out of all the council members, he definitely did the most work, and this was essentially a desk job for him. It was tedious work unfit for Saiyans, but it was extremely important work that needed to be done by a pure-hearted Saiyan for the sake of their planet and their people. With the meeting done, Bardock returns home after unsuccessfully trying to convince the older Saiyan Nappa to a spar. Nappa had actually accepted, but after popping something the wrong way, he wasn't really fit for a fight anymore. He greets Gine, who is holding on to her youthful looks a lot better than he is, likely due to having much less stress than he does, and the two embrace and sit down to relax before dinner. But then someone bangs on the door of their home. Bardock rushes out and sees a random Saiyan calling for him. Grand Elder, Boss Bardock. There's some weird creature in town and he's asking to see our leader. He's really strong. Bardock grins and tells the other Saiyan to lead the way. Thankfully, Kakarot and his team were off planet on missions. That meant if this turned into one, he'd get to be the one to fight. When he arrives, he finds Beerus and Whis in the center of town, looking around appraisingly and eyeing the Saiyans suspiciously. There was one young Saiyan on the ground who had apparently challenged the creature and was now looking as if he'd been easily defeated, hence the supposed strength of these visitors. Bardock loudly asks what is going on here, and Whis grins, knowing who he is from watching his escapades. He then tells Beerus that this is the closest thing the Saiyans have to a king currently, and Beerus eyes the leader of a Saiyan. Already, he can tell this being is much different from King Vegeta. Saiyans all had pride, but this Saiyan's pride didn't seem as overbearing as King Vegeta's had been. When Beerus looked into the king's eyes, he saw a pride that eclipsed all sense of empathy or insight the man could have had. Bardock wasn't like that. He also had much more levity and joy in his gaze. With a small grunt, Beerus introduces himself as the God of Destruction. Now, it's not 100% clear if every single Saiyan was aware of who Beerus was or had even seen him before other than King Vegeta and Prince Vegeta. So for this scenario, we will say that only King Vegeta, Vegeta himself, and a handful of the Saiyans serving in the Saiyan castle had actually seen and heard of who and what Beerus was. Bardock is very curious about the title and is about to ask if he's supposed to take that as a threat. But his years of diplomacy and working with the Galactic King, Lord Guru, and the new Grand Elder Muri had taught him to always try and seek peace first. If that failed, then you could knock skulls loose. Instead, he asked the cat what his business was here. This also made Beerus very curious and surprised, but he didn't convey it. The god explains he's just out and about visiting other planets, though at the moment, he was feeling a bit peckish. He tried Saiyan food before and was wondering if it changed any. Bardock sighs at not getting the fight he was hoping for and tells the god and Angel to follow him. He and his wife were just about to settle down for dinner, and she'd love to have some guests. So Beerus and Whis follow Bardock back to his home, where they meet Gine, who upon learning the two had eaten traditional Saiyan foods before, gains a mischievous glint in her eye and prepares a few Earth recipes she'd mastered and at portions she'd make if all three of her children and her adopted son Broly were home. Also feeling pretty gracious and hospitable, Bardock brings out some of his good booze for Beerus and Whis to enjoy with him. Side note, but I feel like Bardock would be a man who really enjoys his alcohol. Even in the old TV special, the first place he goes to warn Saiyans is a bar. And he just has one of those hard-working yet down-to-earth personalities where you feel like he could probably sit down and enjoy a drink with him. Beerus and Whis are dazzled by the food, and the hospitality and kindness is also incredible. That said, Beerus enjoys the food and drink with gusto. He and Bardock knocking the beverages back a little faster than Gine or Whis really want them to out of pure competition. But they can't really control them, so they just kinda shake their heads at their antics.
Man, Cat, you're one hell of a guy, you know that? I thought you'd be all stuck up, but you're pretty fun.
Beerus laughs and bangs on the table a bit too hard, causing it to literally explode. The room goes silent before the drunken Bardock and Beerus burst out laughing again, with Whis chiding his god before causing a do-over to repair the table.
I thought you Saiyans were nothing but upstarts and punks, but you've sure changed. I'm glad Frieza failed.
Gine raises an eyebrow at that statement, but Whis nervously waves her off, acting as if Beerus was just too drunk to know what he was saying. The god was going to talk them out of some really good food if he didn't shut up. Bardock and Beerus continue to bond over food and drink, while Bardock even began to explain more in depth about the Saiyans' recent changes, but Gine did most of the work on that. Bardock was, however, able to complain about Kakarot and how he wanted the young Saiyan to take over for him as the boss of the Saiyans. He is able to elaborate that he feels his son would be a better leader than he is, but he also complains about not having any good fights lately. Beerus stumbles up to his feet and says he's also been looking for a good scrap, and he and Bardock get excited about this. Before the two can get too rowdy, Whis decides he'll take them and Gine to an uninhabited yet nearby planet so they don't mess up anything too badly. A quick trip full of trying to keep the drunken duo from puking everywhere later, and the group arrive to a barren planet. Whis says he'll step in if Beerus gets too carried away, and Gine jokes that she'll do the same as she and Whis dig into a dessert she prepared. The two new friends then face off with each other and begin their clash, both sides realizing the other was a lot stronger than they originally thought. Bardock quickly realizes he'll need the power of the Super Saiyan form, and even the evolution of it to the second form of Super Saiyan that he'd found while training with his sons. Beerus is flabbergasted at how strong this mortal is, and it is taking a ton more effort than he expected to use against the Saiyan, but he blames it on the alcohol in his system. Now remember, Bardock and the Saiyans have been acting as heroes and getting S-cells for a very long time and at a near constant rate. Training with the people like Broly, Goku, and Vegeta, prodigies who grow in strength quickly, it's no wonder that their power has grown this much. And while Bardock may not have trained or fought as much as he liked, the amount he actually did would be considered excess to a lot of other Saiyans. Even amongst warriors like his sons and Vegeta, he was still a force to be reckoned with, and he was always happy to put the young bucks in their place. The battle goes on a lot longer than anyone initially thought it would, and it does a lot of damage to the thankfully uninhabited planet. But finally, Bardock falls asleep from his exhaustion and the alcohol, and Beerus isn't too far behind him, flopping asleep on top of his new friend. Whis and Gine finish their dessert and sigh as they collect the two before returning to the former planet with Vegeta. The angel then apologizes for his god's eccentricity, but Gine is pretty used to this type of behavior. She thanks him for helping Bardock get a workout and invites him to come back if he'd ever like to again. Whis smiles, and with that, he's off. On the way home, Beerus wakes up from his nap and questions Whis on what had actually happened. Whis tells him, and Beerus realizes he didn't even ask about the Super Saiyan God and begins to basically throw a half-drunken tantrum. Whis tells him to calm down. They can return when Beerus has had a bit more rest and isn't so inebriated. Said God of Destruction was going to argue but ended up passing out instead, and Whis just sighs, finishing their journey back to their home. On the bright side, he had a new friend he could go and enjoy food with when Beerus was asleep. And like I said, the universe had gotten pretty peaceful and pretty boring, so nothing really happens other than this. Beerus would go and take another year of sleep before returning to the planet of the Saiyans. This time, he is much more focused and remembers to ask his new friend Bardock about the Super Saiyan God. The older Saiyan doesn't know much, and after asking around between the other Saiyans, they aren't much help either. At this point, Beerus is too friendly with Bardock to really try and threaten him, especially about something that he and the other Saiyans have no real control over, like lost knowledge. Instead, the God of Destruction just sighs out of disappointment. Bardock sees this and decides to go and get into contact with planet Namek and see if they know anything, or better yet, ask the Dragon Porunga. Beerus watches curiously as Bardock has a telepathic conversation, and the Saiyan looks kind of shocked at what he's hearing. When he finishes, he relays a story about a group of Saiyans in the past that rejected the idea of the Saiyans of the past and unlocked an amazing power known as Super Saiyan God. If 5 pure heart Saiyans put their power into a 6, then they could achieve this form. That explains why this ability was lost. Hearing the secret of his premonition, Beerus gets excited and tells Bardock that he can just turn into a god for him since there were so many pure heart Saiyans now. Bardock considers this and is pretty excited by the idea, but something feels wrong. As much as he'd like to attain the power of a god and take on Beerus, something about this just seems way more important than a spar for kicks or a drunken spar. Not just that, this could be a really good opportunity to get Kakarot's ass in gear. A bit reluctantly, Bardock explains that Kakarot and his team would be returning to the planet later that day. They were younger and stronger than Bardock by a great deal, and that excites Beerus, but Bardock asks a favor of him. Later, and off-planet, Kakarot and his friends were celebrating another well-done job. Even Vegeta was a bit more chipper than he would usually be. They could see their planet in the distance and finish off their landing phase. As soon as they got off the ship though, they begin to see that Saiyans are running and screaming in terror. There in the sky, almost as if the scourge of Frieza had returned, there was an extremely smug-looking creature hovering above their capital city. Combat Saiyans who fought against the feline invader were easily incapacitated, though it was unclear if he was killing them or not. Seeing the fight and the danger, Kakarot and his crew instantly jump into action and fly towards the creature to fight it off. Together, they are able to give it a pretty good challenge, but they are beaten down with their Super Saiyan forms activated. Broly and Vegeta are able to hang in there a bit longer than the others, but even they are defeated really easily. Up close and personal, Vegeta finally recognizes who this creature is, but he does not react in fear. He had lost all respect for his father as a Saiyan and as a warrior. He didn't view the god as some insurmountable force, but instead as someone he could prove himself against by doing what his father couldn't. That said, he does inform his friends of who this is, the God of Destruction. The only one who remained in the fight so far was Kakarot, who had been held up in the air by his throat after being caught by Beerus. The god greets him, saying that he's been waiting on a Saiyan named Kakarot. In fact, he and his entire planet had been waiting on him and his crew. And they weren't here when they really needed them. Some heroes they were, huh? He then grins evilly and slams Kakarot into the ground just like the others. Broly quickly taps into his anger while the others begin using their Super Saiyan forms, all ganging up on the God of Destruction. Beerus is getting a much better workout than what Bardock had given him and is quickly getting into the whole bad guy act that he's putting on. As such, he's giving a lot more effort than he really has to in this fight, but he's loving this. Meanwhile, the Saiyans are doing next to nothing against their foe. Even Broly with all his anger is nearing his limits. Beaten down and exhausted, the group all struggled to their feet as there was no way they'd ever let anyone threaten their planet ever again. Beerus laughs and stops them, telling them they're acting like old Saiyans and thinking only with their fists. They had obviously evolved past that and they needed to act like it. What use was fighting him in the exact same manner that just got them defeated gonna do? Try something new. This is what brought the Saiyans to their current prosperity, wasn't it? Kakarot growls at this, but tells his team the cat is correct, and that they need to think of something different. Beerus smirks at Kakarot and applauds him, and can understand why his father and the council want the man to take over leadership. He decides to offer them some more advice and begins to tell the group about a group of Saiyans from the past that rejected the way things had been in the past and discovered something incredible by doing so. He gives them the hint: 5 of you put your power into a 6th Saiyan. This will get you the power to take me on for real, but you've got to throw away that pride, as you'll be fighting me with a power not totally your own. The faces of Kakarot and his team barely changed. Though the idea wasn't very appealing, neither was allowing this, admittedly nice invader to terrorize their world. There was just one issue. Kakarot's crew was only made up of 5 Saiyans: Kakarot himself, Broly, Vegeta, Raditz, and Tarble. It also seemed like none of the Saiyans lying on the ground defeated were in any shape to stand up or give up much energy, and the area had been evacuated pretty much. But a voice cuts in as Bardock reveals himself. Everyone cheers, but it's clear the older Saiyan is taking the situation very seriously. Broly curiously asks his surrogate father figure where he had been, and the Saiyan answers that he's getting older. Takes him a bit longer to get around. With a pointed look to Kakarot, he mentioned that that's one of the biggest reasons he should retire. Beerus taps his foot impatiently and tells him to get on with it, but the group now has to decide who gets the energy. While Raditz would love to claim the power of a god, being one of the most egotistical Saiyans there, he is well aware of the fact that he is not the strongest there as well. Tarble suggests that as the strongest of them, Broly should be the one to get the energy. Vegeta is also willing, but much less than everyone else is, while also believing that Broly had the best chance of winning the fight. Kakarot is pretty much torn, and everyone waits with bated breath as he decides that Broly should in fact be the one to take on Beerus. The tallest Saiyan by no means really wants this fight, as he didn't many others like it. He enjoyed training and exercise, but he had never been a fan of actual combat. His friends knew this, but in this situation, as the strongest, this was his responsibility. Watching the Saiyans interact, Beerus is again impressed and surprised. A power to rival his own is offered, and the Saiyans do not reject it out of their foolish pride. But those who it is offered to are reluctant to claim it for very different reasons. Beerus grins and says he'll pick since they're taking so long, and begins a game of eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That ends with his claw pointing at Kakarot. He isn't much weaker than the big guy, and once more, he is extremely interesting to Beerus. Kakarot grimaces at the idea of having to fight with power that isn't all his own, but accepts this as his father and friends surround him. They begin to pour their power into him, but something happens. Inspired by Kakarot, who they had all come to see as an inspiration and hero, some of the defeated Saiyans around them begin to struggle to hold their hands out. They weren't many in number, but Kakarot was definitely receiving energy from more than just 5 pure-hearted Saiyans at this point. With a tremendous flourish, a power lost to time reawakens as Kakarot crosses the threshold into godhood and begins to take on Beerus as equals. Now, choreography-wise, this fight would be extremely similar to the canon version of this fight. Kakarot is pretty far beyond the version of Goku to take on Beerus in canon, but I think I should put him only a bit closer to Beerus' full power than actually stronger than him. Granted, Kakarot has a lot more alien techniques than canon Goku did, so there are definitely some attacks that he can pull out. Maybe making clones of himself, or even gigantification from the spirit control techniques of the Ardradians. What really changes here is the dialogue. Beerus pokes and prods Kakarot, testing his resolve and questioning him about things. Why wouldn't he accept his new role as the boss of the Saiyans? Why did he think his people looked up to him so much? Why wasn't he here to protect them when they really needed him? These questions whirl around in Kakarot's head as he fights hard. He couldn't help but think of his grandfather figure, Lord Guru. He could see images of himself as a child crying alone before his family and the people who made him who he is today began to appear around him. He would protect them. He would strive for a peaceful existence as the Namekians had taught him. And as a true Saiyan would, he would fight with all his power to protect it. His power explodes and protects his planet and his people from Beerus' destruction. Beerus grins at this declaration from Kakarot and calls out to Bardock, asking if that was satisfactory. The older Saiyan nods with a proud yet sly smile as he and Beerus explain themselves. This was a real attack, and it served to show the younger Saiyans that there were still higher amounts of power to attain and that they should always be on guard. Just because things were peaceful didn't mean you had to slack off. At the same time, it was the perfect test to make sure Kakarot was ready to take up leadership and show him that he should be the current leader of the Saiyans. Kakarot and his team growl at Bardock in anger and embarrassment before Kakarot himself passes out from exhaustion. Now this will be the last fast forward of this timeline, because from here, things are going to get boring. And again, boring means peaceful. The Saiyans made very minute changes under the new leadership of Kakarot. The planet was finally given a new name that Bardock couldn't believe he hadn't thought of himself. The same homeworld was now known as Planet Guru, and the Guru Defense Force had grown so large that a Galactic Patrol had mostly been absorbed by it. But the two organizations ran virtually the same, already making this a very smooth transition. The members of Kakarot's elite squad would slowly join his council, and the types of meetings the group had were more like sparring matches than meetings, but they always got the job done. As this generation 2 began to grow older, they would slowly settle into roles that suited them best. Broly would finally retire from fighting and actually move on to become a teacher like Gine had before her own retirement. He was extremely well suited for teaching meditation and control over great power. Vegeta would move on to actually become the head of the Guru Defense Force, a position formerly known as the Galactic Patrol King, a warrior leader who led every battle he and his soldiers fought. Kakarot would continue to serve the Saiyan race as their Grand Elder, but he made a lot of use of the making doubles technique through spirit control. This allowed him time to train with the God of Destruction's attendant, and continue to seek further strength to protect the peace he and his people had achieved. The other Saiyans would go on to live happy, peaceful lives full of love, and of course training and testing their strength against each other in training bouts. Everything was peaceful and safe. The Saiyans, the Namekians, and the whole of the universe were happy that one Saiyan had grown up Namekian and made life better for everyone by combining his two cultures. And that, everyone, is where this timeline ends. So the video is already 36 plus minutes, but there are a few concerns I imagine come up from some of you in the comments, so I'm going to try and handle them here really quickly. Why were there no power levels or in-depth power scaling in the video? It's because I didn't think they truly mattered for this part. This one was all about bringing this timeline to a very satisfying ending. And for this one, I just didn't feel like a number would add to that satisfaction, and it saves me some time with the editing to not put it there anyway. How come this part is so much like an epilogue? It was always supposed to be that way. This was my first ever really popular Dragon Ball What If, so it's always been my baby. It's also one that I had a really cool idea for, and it was one of my most original ideas, and I had to delay it a lot because of the manga. I had like 3 or 4 copycat scenarios pop up on different channels, and there was a ton of demand for me to go ahead and finish it in the meantime, so I wanted to do so as soon as possible. I'm sorry if this wasn't what everyone else wanted, but this is the end of the story I've envisioned since part 1. What actually happens to Moro in this timeline, because you never go too in depth with it. Moro is forever imprisoned. I didn't want to harp on this, but with the help of the Saiyans, the Galactic Patrol gets so powerful and widespread that everyone who could free Moro is locked up, and even if Moro gets enough mech to free himself, he's still at his weakest form, and the Galactic Patrol is strong enough to put him back in prison with a lot of effort, but they still get him back in there. Yeah, it's a bit of a cop-out, but so is a lot of storytelling. Finally, will there ever be more of this timeline? In truth, yes, it's possible to add more. Time doesn't stop flowing, but the real question is, should there be more? And I really say no. One of my major problems with Dragon Ball as a story, as much as I love it, is that it is never allowed to just have a final cathartic ending. That's one thing I really love about GT, is that it has one ending that it's cathartic, it ends, it's over. And yeah, this timeline could follow the same vein as, Super has and Z has, but it's a different timeline than our main one, so let's treat it like that. I'd say all stories should come to an end, and I feel like this one really should come to an end. With that out of the way, thank you all so much for watching and viewing the series. I know this was like an 8 or 5 month wait from part 3 to part 4. So sorry about that, but as you can see, a lot really went into this one, and I'm really glad to finally be able to close the book on this one. Shout outs to my good buddy Mondo Cool for lending his voice, Oxnagadabo for some gameplay, and to Smugstick and Dread Trex for their script review and help brainstorm. They really did a lot, and they really mean a lot to me as friends, so I really do appreciate them. As usual, a huge shout out to the patrons for supporting the channel. This video is already super long, so sadly I won't be reading all your names, but they are on screen. Thank you guys so much for going the extra mile and surpassing your limits. I truly love each and every one of you. Finally, remember to take care of yourselves, and as always, go beyond plus ultra. See you guys next time.